in there. For this webinar, then, we're just going to concentrate on the layouts, and I'm going to talk you through the changes that we've made and explain why we've made them, and then we'll go on and look at the retractions stuff that people have been asking for that we've put in. So for the layouts, I don't know if anybody is new. I recognize some names there. Well, I recognize some names there that I don't recognize. So I'm guessing there are some fairly new information specialists on the call. So you may not have seen the old version, where essentially the layouts of these 4 panels were broadly fixed, and certainly the content of what it was in each of the panels was fixed, and that works fine on a big screen. But doesn't work terribly well if you're on a smaller screen, and doesn't allow you to change the layout to work with different tasks. Part of the reason for us developing it the way we did in the first place was in response to user requests. When we looked at the way information specialists were working with the kind of data that we got here, the best compromise that we could come up with for a web interface was to have quite a lot of information on the screen at the same time. And on a big screen that works really well. On a smaller screen, it means that each of the windows, each of the panels can become almost unusable. So on advice from well, it wasn't really advice, it was actually looking at what people were doing and watching them work and talking to information specialists and seeing how unusable it could be on a smaller screen. We put together a different approach, ran that by the user support team, and started to think about how we could make life easier for people. And the version that's out at the moment is pretty well stable. Well, it's certainly stable. It's pretty well set. It's not going to change very much unless people come back with really good ideas, in which case we'll certainly put them on the development list. So for the layouts, let's just go through what we've got. The default layout is 4 panels, and if you've used CRS before, you'll know that you can change the relative width of those panels just by dragging the center bar or up and down using the horizontal bar. The center bar is for the whole of the screen, so if I pull it across, it'll move everything across. The horizontal bars refer to each of the half screens, if you like, so they move independently. That'll move up and down there. The default that you see, and probably everybody has got, is this layout with the search history here, the search results here, the list of your folders here, and the currently selected record here. So I've got, let's just select this search over here. That shows me the results in this side over here. When I click a record here, it shows me the content of the record. What we wanted to do was to enable you to change that, and there are several different routes you can take. If you click on the Set Layout button, you'll see, certainly on yours, you'll have these 4 default layouts. Basically, what they do is really quickly just enable you to flick between having 2 panels on the screen at one time. So if you wanted your search results and the list of your search history and the list of results for one task, and that's really easy to get to that. You can have 3 panels, which would be your search history, the search results, and the content of each of the records, or 4 panels we just had. Or we've also introduced a 1-panel, excuse me, a 1-panel layout, and that's kind of different to the rest, because a 1-panel layout, I suspect that most people won't use a 1-panel layout, but it is quite useful if you're on a mobile, for example, or possibly on an iPad. Although on an iPad you can get away with certainly with 2 panels. But when you've only got 1 panel, you can only see one thing at a time. So with 1 panel, we do things slightly differently, and we. By double clicking, sorry, I realized you wouldn't have heard the click. I double clicked the search results in the search results panel here. I double click that line, and that actually changes the panel and takes me to the search results. And then if I went and looked at one of the records, that would open the record in a full panel. So it's basically changing the way that the user interface works from having everything on the screen at the same time to having everything being shown sequentially. And to get back to the previous screen, you just click the back button and it'll take you back through the pages. It is quite useful on a mobile device. It does make a difference, and it does mean that you can work quite successfully for quite a lot of tasks on a smaller device. Lots of stuff that you do as information specialists, just it's going to be impossible on a phone, but some things it is quite useful to be able to do. So that's the single layout. Let's go back to the 4 because that's the one that fits best on my screen. The next thing that you can do is to change the content of each of these panels. And you do that simply by clicking on the arrow at the top of each one. And you can see that you've got a list of things that you can put into these panels. Let's change this one, for example, to have, let's go for a study listing here because I want to talk about that separately. If I were to change it, for example, to record, it would take record from where it was down here and move whatever was in this panel down to this panel. So if you see, it swapped the record, the reference record with the studies panel. If I just do the same thing again, so if I bring the record back into this bottom right panel, you'll see that my studies panel goes back up to the top left. So that's to stop having 2 panels having the same content open on the screen at the same time, because that makes it, well, there's not a lot of point in that, and it also makes it very complicated to manage changes in one panel being reflected in another. What we can do then is to, so you can certainly play around with the content of the panels and set them up in the way that you want them. What you can then do is to save that layout as a layout that can be pulled back later. So if I call that my studies layout or something like that, that will save the layout, and that then becomes available in this list of possible layouts here. So it's really easy to set up different layouts for different purposes and then just really quickly switch between the 2 depending on what you're trying to achieve. And that, I think, gets us away from the horrible business of having to have so much on the screen at one time. You can really just set up the screen for the particular task that you're interested in and really quickly switch between layouts to achieve that. In order to make this happen, this was actually driven quite a lot by the current development stream, which is to handle studies better within the CRS. And the very first thing that we needed to do was to make it easier to deal with studies rather than the way that we had before. Those of you who worked with studies would remember that to get access to your list of studies, there was actually a drop-down tab here. That didn't really work because this is a pull-out and these are panels. So we've moved that now, and it's now in this panel here, or wherever you choose to put it, but we're going to keep it in here for now. So if you want to look at your studies, the easiest way is just to start typing. I'm in the dementia group register here, and I should say that this is the demo site, so it's all sorts of data that Anna would throw her hands up in horror at, but it's not her data, it's data that we've played with for demo purposes. So if we do a search for DOM, for example, in the study, it'll bring back all of the studies that match that name, and then you can just click on the study and see the details of it. And this is perhaps the biggest difference to what we had before in terms of the study. And again, it's in response to what people have been asking for. So over here, you now get in this top panel, the study record. And the study record has the fields of data in it. This one's not populated by the looks of it, or probably, oh, it's partially populated, as you'd expect. Let's just hide some of those fields. There we go. So the actual study metadata that's being put into these fields appears in the top here. The references associated with the study are in the bottom panel here. So you get to see both at the same time, and that makes it much more easy to use. If you want to edit one of the references, the way we handle that, rather than having a pop-up or anything, is that if you click on the reference, it actually opens it full screen. You can then go in and make whatever changes you need to make to the reference, and save it or reset it and close it down again, and that will save the record. It's worth probably just talking through some of the developments that we're going to be making to the, or have made and are going to be making to the study record itself, because this is the ongoing phase of development. The next part of what we're doing on study development is the deduplication. So there's a big module coming through probably in the next release that'll help you deduplicate studies rather than deduplicating references. So finding studies that have the same references in them or are looking at the same thing. We've already got the reviews panel in here. So this probably many of you will be aware of, some may not. For each of the studies we harvest from the Cochrane Library, the details of the published reviews that study appears in, and this one looks as though it just appears in one review, and you can link straight through to the Cochrane to the review on the Cochrane Library from here. We just pull the characteristics of studies in. The other item that we're going to be changing is the studification tab, which actually gives you a lot of information about the study and about references that might be associated with that study, but it's not particularly easy to use, and I think we've had enough suggestions to enable us to go and change that into something that's much more usable. So that's something that's coming through in the next release as well. You've got the usual things on here. You've got the audit trail of the study, which tells you that it was linked, is linked to a review. I don't know if any of the others are. They're probably not, I wouldn't think. Okay, yeah, it is. So that's linked to a review as well. So you can go through and you can see the audit log of the study, so you know that when references were associated with it. These are really old pieces of data. Look, these are back to 2013. This is a log pulled over from standalone CRS, but at least all of the history of each of these studies is in there. Okay, I think that's probably all I wanted to say in terms of how you use it. I think I've probably actually spoken for twice as long as I was anticipating. I wanted it to be a really quick, demo of what you can do, and then let you go away and play with it and set it up in the way that you want it. Are there any questions at this point?
Feel free to use your microphones or type in the chat. If you'd rather put your hand up before you talk, please feel free to. Obviously, you can unmute yourself when you're ready to talk.
I'm happy that there are no questions. I would like to think it's straightforward, and what I'd also like to urge you to use the different layouts, and if you can, as always, if you can think of something that makes it better, then push that through the ideas tab. And again, for those of you who don't know, the ideas tab is up here on the top right. If you've got any suggestions for changes to the CRS, just click ideas. And you can look at other people's ideas and vote on them here, and also add your own suggestions, and people will then vote on those. So the whole point of doing it is to make your life easier. So if it's not making your life easier, then we want to know about it. And if we can make it even easier, then we want to know about that too. Okay, if there's no questions, I will just spend